Hello, mates.
Hello, everybody.
How's it going?
I just had to clean up cat vomit. How are you doing?
I'm doing alright. I was waiting for you this morning.
Yeah, I was late. I don't do homework very well.
No, he didn't finish his research until this morning.
No.
What have we been up to?
Cleaning up cat vomit.
We went to see Slipknot.
Yeah, we did that too.
We did, and it was so much fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Although we're very aware that we are no longer 18 years old.
Yeah, no. Some amateur mistakes were made, weren't there?
There wasn't really... Well, you made a massive...
I made some amateur mistakes. Is that better?
Yeah. So we road tripped up to Dublin with a couple of our friends. It's Moz from, the Halloween episode. Yeah. We went up with her and her sister.
And the voice from the background of the Halloween episode.
Yeah, James. And we road tripped up with them. And it was a little bit stressful. But
it wasn't, because the traffic, it wasn't that bad.
No. We got there and we checked into the hotel, got ready, and I went out for a few drinks. And those few drinks turned into us getting quite...
Buzzed.
Quite buzzed. Someone over here forgot to drink.
I drank. I just drank coffee and alcohol.
Yeah, so nothing of sustenance that will actually hydrate you.
No.
So we got to Slipknot, and I was wearing these big fucking New Rock boots. They're really comfy, but I weigh significantly more than when I last wore them. So yeah, there's that. And the band Behemoth were supporting them. They were really good.
Yeah, they're always really good though.
And then Slipknot came on and everything just went to utter fucking chaos.
Yeah.
The first song they played, what was it? Unsainted?
Yeah.
Pits opened up everywhere. It was fucking mental.
I was very aware that I'm nearly 30.
Yeah. And I was having a fucking blast. I was having the time of my life. And then about 3/4 of the way through, you looked at me and you're like, I need to go. I'm really hot. So I was like, take your fucking jacket off then. So he took his jacket off, gave it to me, and then fucked off.
Yeah.
And because you almost passed out.
Yeah, so from my time when I used to be around hot things all the time, I knew that when you feel really hot but you're not actually sweating, you're in a bad way and you need to cool down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I figured out I was in trouble and I left.
Yeah, that's what happened. Me and Moz's sister, we ended up staying together throughout the whole thing. It was Duality, I think.
I was back for Duality though.
You weren't, because you weren't with us.
Well, no, I wasn't with you, but I was back in the crowd trying to find you.
Yeah, well, Duality started and pits opened up everywhere. We were stuck right in the middle of 3 pits. I will remember this till the day I fucking die. It was like war. It was like the Battle of the Bastards.
Yeah.
It was insane, and it was so much fun. We basically paid €80 to get fucked up.
Yeah, we paid €80 just to get beaten up for the night.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we did. And then we were all too fucked to go
out afterwards, yeah.
To actually go out and have a good time afterwards. And
but we did that before, so it was okay.
We did, and we ended up back in their hotel room. Drinking tea and just digesting the night. And
yeah.
We went to bed.
Yeah. Like the grown-ass adults we are.
But it was actually so fun to wake up without a hangover.
It was, actually. That was nice.
That was, the highlight.
And as we had to navigate back out of Dublin City the next day, it was nice to have a fairly clear head for that.
Oh, yeah. That's it. That's all we've really been up to.
Yeah.
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 What else? If you're looking for videos on our YouTube channel, there's an issue. Just getting that out there.
There is an issue with already low-quality content.
Yeah. Well, we decided to film a video. And half the video was fine, and then the other half
was not fine.
Was not fine. I think the video file got corrupted, so every time I try and load it, my computer crashes. So we have to refilm that part of it. And it's just been, we've actually been really busy. I've got some photography stuff coming up and all that. So, but the good thing is we never said exactly when we'd upload. So,
no,
so it's there.
So you can't be at us because
you can't
we never
be
gave you a schedule.
But yeah, no, it's coming. Just be patient, and that's it.
We're not very good YouTubers.
Not really. Shall we go on to Know That Actually Happened? I don't even know what your fucking news segment
we haven't thought of that yet.
We'll just keep it as Know That Actually Happened.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'll go first.
Yeah, because I'm too political.
Yeah, tosser.
Yeah, utter tosser.
We got a comment on our podcast, and it said that we were too political. Now, fair enough, we were a bit political in the
Yeah,
last episode.
I was getting a little bit soapboxy the last time.
Yeah, but, and they were like, oh yeah, this is my first and last episode. And I was like, okay.
Cool story, bro.
That's fine.
Cool story, bro.
And then they called us a tosser, so...
Tosser.
Yeah, it's a very British thing.
It's a very British thing. I bet it was someone who knew me.
Probably.
Yeah.
And they don't like you.
Probably not. I can't say I blame them.
Okay, so mine... I actually found this one on Facebook a couple of days ago. So for once, I wasn't actually searching. It just came up. But it's kind of been all over the news lately. It comes from NBC News. And it says, scientists move doomsday clock closer to midnight.
Oh, yeah, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists clock.
That's it. They adjusted the doomsday clock. And it's now closer than it's ever been to midnight.
It was 2 minutes to midnight in, I think it was the 60s.
Yeah.
And maybe again in the 80s.
I think it was as well the early 2000s.
Yeah. What is it now? It's like a minute and a half to midnight, isn't
100 seconds.
100 seconds.
We're not counting the countdown in hours. We're not counting it in even minutes.
It's seconds now.
It's seconds now. And, like, we all hear, like, the doomsday clock is, you know, who will be there when it strikes midnight. Like, that's the big question.
Yeah.
But in reality, it doesn't take into account a lot of things. It's not entirely accurate.
Well, the thing about the doomsday clock is it was created, originally it was a scale of how close we are to atomic annihilation, basically.
It wasn't just atomic.
It was, because it was in the 50s when it was first created. It was when the Cold War was really starting. Mm-hmm. And it was a group of concerned scientists with these new weapons saying, this is how close we feel we are to annihilating ourselves with these new weapons. And over time, it's taken more and more into, like, doomsday stuff into account.
Like climate change.
Like climate change and pandemics and overpopulation and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So basically they're concerned about nuclear arsenals. He also, one of the guys that changed the clock, he also warned that urgent action on climate change is critical and praised the efforts of youth-led protests sparked by the teenage activist Greta Thunberg.
I mean, let's not forget that not long ago, I think Iran's nuclear armed or nearly nuclear armed, but one nuclear armed, one nearly nuclear armed were firing missiles at each other, basically.
Yeah. Like
the US assassinated a leading Iranian general and the Iranians fired a load of missiles back at a US airbase.
Yeah.
Like, that's as close as things have gotten for a while.
Yeah, like, but then again, I read somewhere, it's not in this article, but that when the doomsday clock was the furthest away from midnight that it's ever been, that it shouldn't have been, because they weren't taking certain things into account.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Like, it's not, that's what I'm saying when I mean it's not entirely accurate.
Oh, yeah, I get what you mean now.
And, like, fair enough, there may be no one around to turn the hands to midnight, but then again, like, how close can we get?
Yeah, how far do you keep pushing the red line before something goes?
Yeah. So that was my no, that actually happened.
Yeah. Mine is...
Well, you got your new segment.
My new segment, which is still as yet unnamed. I wanted to call it the worst year ever, but that's been taken by someone else, so I can't do that.
Yeah. Answers on a postcard, please.
Answers on a postcard, please. But only on but make sure you double seal the postcard, because no doubt someone's watching.
Don't start. Don't fucking start with me.
Basically, there's been a report out, and the wealth gap between the richest and the poorest in the world hang on, let me try that again. The wealth gap between the world's richest and the world's poorest people has been widening for more than 70% of the global population.
Now, what does that mean?
That means that, in essence, the rich people are getting richer and the poor people are getting poorer because of stupid things like tax breaks for the wealthy, and then on the other side you get people, say, for example, if they're in their overdraft, they get charged heinously for being in their overdraft. So poor people are getting charged for having no money. They're getting charged money for having no money.
Yeah.
Like, everything seems to be designed to screw people who are poorer and prop up people who are richer.
Yeah.
Like, there's massive corporations that don't pay any tax whatsoever in this side of the world. The company owner of Amazon is worth, I think he's the richest man on earth, and he's worth a stupid amount of money.
Yeah.
And the problem is when you get into places like, say, Africa and Brazil and things like that, the gap really starts to widen, where people are in desperate poverty compared to really rich, corrupt people.
Yeah.
And it's wrong, basically.
It is wrong.
but no one seems to want to do anything about it.
You know what we need?
What?
Robin Hood.
There was a Robin Hood tax proposed as well.
Yeah.
And it never got anywhere.
Of course it didn't.
But
because it didn't benefit the people who were imposing it.
benefit the people in power, because a lot of people in power have a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Like, they're wealthy landlords, they've got shares in wealthy markets, they are sitting on boards, they're shareholders, they have investments in places here, there and everywhere. I'm not against people doing well for themselves, in any sense of the word. I'm against people fucking the system to make people poorer while making themselves richer.
Yeah. I just say put them all on minimum wage and things will change.
Yeah.
That's it. It's as simple as that.
Or universal basic income.
Yeah, that too. Or make things more affordable.
Yeah, but
to be honest, I'm not opposed to people being rich.
I'm not at people for being wealthy.
If people work hard, they deserve.
They do.
And I may get shit for this, but the person down the road who can't be asked to get up off their ass and get a job or work or anything, why should they have the same as someone who's working 60 hours a week?
And that's fair, but what it comes down to is when you are working 60 hours a week and the conditions are so set against you, that's when it becomes a problem.
Like nurses.
And
like everyone
teachers.
In the healthcare industry.
Yeah.
So let's not go on a tangent here.
No, but basically that is a problem, is that there is such a wide gap between the wealthy and the not so wealthy.
Yeah.
And that is a contributing factor to a lot of problems.
Exactly.
So that's it. I'm done. I'm not political anymore. Done. Finished.
Should we move on to the episode? So this episode is part 2 of the Jonestown that we started 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
If you haven't listened to that, go and listen to that first. It kind of sets up a lot of what we're talking about here. And it is harrowing. This is probably... I don't know, we're kind of bordering on true crime here, but I do believe it's fucked up enough.
It's incredibly messed up.
It's incredibly fucked up. We're going to deal with stuff against babies and children and just generally fucked up shit. And if you don't want to hear it, that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll forgive you for not listening to this one.
Yeah.
And we're going to play part of Jim Jones's speech.
Only part of it, though.
Only part of it. It's really scarring. It's really harrowing. So if you want to listen to the full thing, we'll leave the link to it in the show notes.
It was haunting.
Yeah. It was... I did all of this last week, and I listened to the full thing. And doing all this research, it really put me in a bad mood.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
It really, really brings your mood down. So if you're feeling a bit fragile today, I probably wouldn't recommend listening to this.
Without further ado,
let's start.
So where we left him off, it was in California. Mm-hmm. And by 1973, things were getting a little bit rocky for him and his cohorts in California.
Yeah.
Jim Bob had been making the news in a way that he wouldn't really want to. Several people had defected. They were telling their stories. Things were looking a little bit iffy. So, what Jim and the People's Temple decided to do, they began to prepare for an immediate action contingency plan in case of a police or media crackdown, which is exactly what a legitimate organisation does.
And what was that?
Their contingency plan was to up sticks and move again, but out of the US altogether. They had several places to consider: Canada, Barbados, Trinidad, but they eventually settled on Guyana.
Okay.
So Guyana is a small British colony, former British colony.
Do not be saying that.
Yeah. Situated, it's a small place between Brazil and Venezuela, and it's bordered by the ocean. It's a relatively new place. It's only been independent since 1966. It was a good shout for a couple of reasons. It was already English-speaking. It was already a socialist republic. The population were reasonably not well off and quite poor.
Which obviously worked for him.
It does. And really, it was just thought that the People's Temple would be left there to do their own thing, because with it being such a new country, the government would be tied up with other things.
And he's away from the media backlash that he's getting in America.
And he is very much away from the media backlash in America. So he thought this was the place. The other thing as well is that because of it being a small, relatively poor country, he thinks he can buy himself power and influence.
Yeah.
Which he does, basically.
Mm-hmm. And offer people kind of like a
haven.
Yeah.
So In 1973, the People's Temple directors passed a resolution to set up an agricultural mission in the country. They go over for a few visits, and they negotiate a lease in 1974 of around 3,800 acres of land. So a pretty sizable chunk of jungle, but it was jungle. It was about 150 miles away from the capital of Georgetown, and it doesn't sound like a nice place.
It was very remote.
Very remote, incredible. It's hard to describe how remote it was, but I have a quote from a survivor who can describe how remote it was. But in sort of like practical terms, it was very, very isolated with like really bad soil, incredibly poor soil.
Yeah.
Which doesn't really sit well for an agricultural project.
Not really.
Just saying. The nearest water source was 7 miles away, and the roads were barely roads. They were dirt tracks at best.
Yeah.
At worst, nothing. Like, it's not great farming land, to be honest. But that's where they wanted to go.
No, that's not where they wanted to go.
No, that's where Jim wanted them to go. It was very isolated, like we said. And we can't imagine this in a world now where it's so connected by everything. But it was crazy. A past member said that it wasn't a case if you had to even run a mile to get to a phone. There were just no phones.
Yeah.
Like, the only method of communication was a ham radio in Jim's office, which talked to a house that they had in Georgetown. And that's the only shortwave they had. I think he could reach California as well, but he actually got in trouble with the FCC for that because they were using channels that they weren't supposed to. And Jim Jones and the People Temple took that as a direct assault on the temple.
Of course they did.
Because, they were making FCC rules about the radio. But that's, small tangent aside, it was fucking isolated.
Yeah.
Like, there was nothing around. It also, interestingly, was very, very close to a disputed border with Venezuela. Which is, I think, another reason why the Guyanans were so happy to have them there. Like, they were very close to this disputed border with Venezuela that has been disputed since the country was formed. And I think the Guyanese thought that US citizens being so close to the border would put off the Venezuelans.
Like kind of deterrent.
Yeah, like, you don't really want to mess with US citizens that close to the border.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's what the Guyanese were sort of hoping for. They were like a passive deterrent being there.
Yeah.
Well. But while this was going on, things were getting bad in California. So you'd have members leaving, or in one instance, a member of the planning committee got beaten so badly that they nearly died.
Yeah.
Like, that all was deteriorating. There was even instance of the high-level planning committee being asked to drink wine, only then to be told later it's poison. And then obviously they didn't die. Jim just turned around and told them that it was a loyalty test. In a chilling case of foreshadowing. Like, it was in California, it was fucked. But it was less fucked in Guyana. Yeah. Because they only had around 30 people there to start with when they first was building Jonestown. So, these 30 people had been there since 1974, and they were happily just tipping away building this community up. So, they were the first sort of people there, and by all accounts, it wasn't terrible. Yeah. So, in 1976, there was about 300 people there, in an estimation, before Jim Jones got there. And it was okay. Like, they did work long hours, but there was enough to go around. It wasn't overcrowded.
Yeah, and I think it kind of felt like they were working for a purpose rather than being forced to work.
And there wasn't so much of Jim Jones's craziness there as well. Like, they were allowed to... They had movie streams. Not streams, obviously, but they screened movies in the evenings from Georgetown, and they did, like, little fun activities and games and things like that. Morale was fairly high. And
you think about it, like, you see this jungle, and you're tasked with making it into a livable community. Like, that's kind of exciting. You can see the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and that must have been quite a morale booster to be living in this mission and seeing it come up from the ground, and you haven't got too many people there that it's not too hard to support yourself, and you've got everything there that you reasonably need, and it'll be hard work, but it'll be rewarding work. Yeah. So 1976 was also another interesting year for things in the California side. Yeah. Because the group Concerned Relatives was formed. Yeah. So Concerned Relatives was like an anti-People's Temple pressure group, formed by an ex-member, Jenny Mills, and her husband, and it started as a kind of support group for people who had gotten out. And
see, that's fucked up in itself.
Yeah, that you need a support group for people who came out.
Yeah, like, red flags.
Yeah. Oh, they paid for it though.
Oh yeah.
They paid for it. And because of the amount of people defecting and the stories they were telling and stuff, that they sort of formed into a pressure group to try and get something done about People's Temple, and they were a real thorn in Jim's side. So the media were really beginning to dig into them now. Reports were coming here, there and everywhere. Ex-members were talking. Jim was starting to lose control in California.
Yeah.
Not helped by the concerned relatives. He hated the concerned relatives.
Well, if you think about it, you're trying to get however many hundred people to do what you're influencing them to do, and then you have these group of people who effectively want to do the exact opposite in your mind.
So he ordered the mass exodus of about 1,000 people into Jonestown.
Yeah. And
that fucked things.
Yeah.
Like, they just couldn't support themselves. People were in sort of 10 people to a room sort of conditions.
Ugh.
It was nasty.
Yeah, because I remember they lived in, like, little houses, like very little shack kind of houses, and they were built for maybe a family of 4.
Yeah, and you had, like, 10 people in there.
Yeah.
It was nasty.
It was cramped and...
So...
Communal living.
Communal living, yo. All the good things they had before Jim arrived soon went away. So you'd have, like, for example, these movie screenings. A nice bit of light entertainment after a hard day's work.
Yeah.
Yeah? No, that got replaced with Soviet propaganda shows, shorts, and sort of things like that. And there'd be long classes on socialism and things in the evenings after you've been working in the fields all day.
More and more brainwashing.
More and more brainwashing. There just wasn't enough food. They had to import massive amounts of food.
Yeah.
To sustain themselves, and even then they were living on diets of basically rice and beans for weeks on end.
There wasn't enough of anything to go around.
No, there wasn't, and it was pretty miserable.
Yeah.
The days turned into sort of 12-hour days for a while.
Yeah.
And then you'd have all your propaganda classes and Soviet short screenings and his long rambling addresses to the people. And that's actually a form of mind control.
Of course it is.
Which is still used in North Korea to this day.
Let's not go there.
No. So it's mind control and behaviour modification.
Fucking hell.
So there you go. Jim seized all the passports and all the documents of the people in Jonestown, and he'd have armed members surrounding the compound all the time for their protection, in inverted commas.
Which really kind of stopped people getting out.
Which was really to stop people leaving. You could only leave with Jim's express permission.
Yeah, and it would be on errands
for the compound. You'd maybe get sent to Georgetown to the temple residence there, but the temple residence there was run by an absolute fanatic.
Yeah.
So you were always under scrutiny. The famous PA system was there as well. So what he'd do is he'd broadcast rambling rants throughout the day.
Yeah.
You'd be constantly hearing Jim's voice talking about something. It'd either just be one of his long sermons, or he'd be reading the news and interpreting it and things like that, and then he'd be at people later asking them what they thought about it. And it got to the point where any sort of screening or news or anything like that, especially if it came from the West, you had to watch it with an interpreter there so they could tell you what to think about it.
Yeah.
Like, full-on North Korea shit, basically.
Stop saying North Korea.
No.
We're gonna get fucking nuked or something. Like, apologies, Korea.
No. So, interestingly though, there was no official sort of capital punishment.
Yeah.
Which sounds odd, but what they did have was a small plywood box where people were forced into it.
Yeah.
And they would be beaten horrifically while they're in this small plywood box. It was even less fun for the children who were forced to hang upside down at the bottom of a well. Yeah. Which is pretty miserable.
Didn't the box, they used to keep them in the box for several days at a time?
Yep. So that was miserable. You imagine being a child hung upside down in the bottom of a well for 12 hours. Even for 10 minutes, even for 30 seconds. That's horrific.
Yeah, no.
For someone who claimed to love children so much, to then do things like that. Not even to... Maybe he didn't do it, but he signed off on it. He sanctioned it. It was okay under Jim.
It was his idea.
It was his idea. That's fucked up. What's not even worse, but still equally as bad, people who attempted to escape, if they were caught, they'd be sent to an advanced medical unit where they were given sedatives like, what's the one that begins with B? Barbiturates, is it?
Not a fucking clue, mate.
Like barbiturates, sort of like diazepam and lithium and Valium and things like that. They were forcibly injected those. They were forcibly injected with sodium pentothal, which, interestingly, is what they call a truth serum.
Yeah.
So that was happening. And that's pretty messed up in itself.
Just a fucking bit.
Just a wee bit. So, like we said, after Jim arrived in 1977, it was fucked.
Yeah.
It was basically what has been called by some people a concentration camp. And I don't think that's too far from the...
Yeah, like, I mean, if you look at how it ended, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think calling it a concentration camp after... obviously, like Auschwitz and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's
a bit off, but, you know. So, yeah, morale was low, people were hungry, perfect time for people to be brainwashed.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not Jim's fault that they're hungry, it's the attacker's fault, it's their enemy's fault. The other thing, as well, is that Jim was a hypocrite. So
filthy fucking
filthy hypocrite. So, Jim was a drug addict. Mm-hmm. Jim would, while his people were starving... Jim was eating well from his own private refrigerator.
He was eating meat. He was eating fresh vegetables. Yeah. He was eating like a king.
He was, while his people were suffering for rice and beans every day.
Barely even
surviving.
Like, you know, really shitty food. And
yeah.
Barely, like, families would have to split meals with each other because there just wasn't enough to go around.
It was horrific. So, I'll talk briefly about the White Knights as well.
Yeah.
Because the White Knights... were Jim's PA system was one of his favourite tools, and what he'd call a white knight was basically an emergency condition.
It was like a code word for they were under attack.
Yeah. So what he'd do is he'd get these white knights and he'd summon the members to a central pavilion for this emergency. These emergencies were always Jim just being fucking Jim. Yeah. Basically, he'd go on his long ranting things about the CIA infiltrating them, people spying on them, people waiting in them for the woods, and
again giving them a common enemy and a common threat.
Yeah, and this would probably usually end in sort of 3 or 4 options. What they can do, they can flee somewhere else. The Soviet Union was always mentioned.
Russia, yeah.
They can fight the attackers. They can flee into the jungle, or they can commit revolutionary suicide.
Yeah.
Now, the revolutionary suicide vote got voted twice, and I have a quote from a temple defector describing what happened during one of these false alarms. Mm-hmm. Everyone, including the children, was told to line up. As we passed through the line, we were given a small glass of red liquid to drink. We were told that the liquid contained poison and that we would die within 45 minutes. We all did as we were told. When the time came when we should have dropped dead, Reverend Jones explained that the poison was not real and that what we'd just been through was a loyalty test. He warned us that the time was not far off when it would become necessary for us to die by our own hands. Like, the White Knights were so critical into doing what Jim had planned for himself and everybody else.
Yeah.
It's like a crying wolf sort of scenario.
Yeah.
Mixed with, these people have been through so much, how much more can they possibly take?
And, like, I think the point as well was to get them used to the idea of doing that so that when the time eventually came that he wanted them to do that, that they wouldn't resist. They'd think it was just another
exercise. Yeah, basically, I think that potentially a lot of what happened could have been people maybe not realising straight away that it was just that it wasn't, you know. Anyway, these White Knights were important to how this went down. And what sort of catalysed and started these White Knights was a little event known as the 6-Day Siege. Mm-hmm. So, the 6-Day Siege starts back in 1972, really, with a man called Timothy Stone. Now, Mr. Stone was a high-ranking member of the People's Temple. He was actually the attorney, for a while, of the People's Temple. They were sort of well-regarded in the cult, and Jim trusted them, and they was reasonably close. However, Jim the Child Snatcher was doing his usual bullshit. The Stones had a son called John, and Jim made Mr. Stone sign a document declaring that Jim Jones was the child's true father and that his son was, quote, bound to the Joneses and the church for life.
Fuck that.
Like,
that's literally kidnapping.
That is why Jim Jones is the child snatcher.
Yeah.
So this pissed his wife off no end.
Whose wife?
Mr. Stone's wife.
Of course, it's her fucking child.
So
what's she gonna do?
She was called Gracie, so I'll call her Gracie from now on. But she was pissed. And thanks to that and other Jim Jones related bullshit, including but not exclusive to being berated in front of everybody in the Planning Commission for denying that Jim Jones was John's father, listening to Jones portray her husband Tim as a homosexual, hypocrisy again, had Jim Jones wave a gun at her in the Planning Commission and threatening to shoot her if she fell asleep, and witnessing the beating of a 40-year-old woman who claimed the temple turned members into robots.
For fuck's sake.
She had enough and she left.
Ah, good woman.
So, on leaving, she begins to fight for custody immediately.
Of course.
And she goes to the point where she threatens to publicly divorce Tim, which would draw a lot of attention to the cult and its culty bullshit.
Yeah.
So, to stop this, Jim sent Tim to Guyana and to try and, separate him from everything that was going on. Mm-hmm. This did not sit well, though, because the People's Temple members in Guyana were spying on him. They were searching through his things. He was tapped. He was tracked. Jim didn't trust him, basically.
Yeah.
So Tim Stone managed to escape. He left, and he defected. And he went back to the States, and he joined up with his wife. And they became an even bigger pain in Jim's rectum.
Yeah.
Because they were going through the courts to try and get custody back of their son. This did not please Mr. Jones.
Of course it didn't.
It's to the point where he would be instructing his followers to write fanatic fan fiction about killing Tim Stone.
What's good with that?
I don't know. I think it's probably just to massage Jim Jones's ego, isn't it?
Yeah.
All these essays about how his people are going to rip Tim Stone limb from limb for what he's done in inverted commas. So, moving forward to 1977, Timothy Stone is in a Georgetown court battling to get court papers to get his son back. Which he gets. He receives the court papers. It all goes in his favour. Because failure to comply with these documents would leave Jim in a breach of, a contempt of court,
yeah,
Jim was in a sort of hard position. He couldn't go back to the States because they had court orders against him in the States.
Yeah.
He couldn't go anywhere in Guyana because it would be seen as breach of contempt of court and he could be arrested. So... And of course, if he gave the child back, then he's lost all his power in front of his followers.
Yeah.
So this puts Jim Jones in a very dangerous position.
Yeah.
And Jim decides to pull some more Jim Jones bullshit, and he sets up another sniper attack on himself. Again.
For fuck's sake.
This is what actually led to the first of the White Knights.
Yeah.
And what he was saying, people, is that his compound was under attack from the Guyanese army, and he had people surrounding the compound day and night, while he was broadcasting his bullshit. It must have made it seem terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, you got your sort of friends guarding the outside of the compound. Trigger fingers looking for people coming to you. So there's going to be the odd couple of shots that go off when you think you see something, but there isn't.
Yeah.
You got Jim, everyone's locked down in the pavilion. You got Jim Jones ranting away. This is going on for a couple of nights. Mm-hmm. Do you imagine how much that must have gotten into people's head? So it was insane. But it got so out of hand that there were civil rights activists from the US sending their support to Jim Jones in Jonestown, thinking they were under genuine attack. That's the level of bullshit that we were dying with. Jim's reply was, "We will die unless we are granted the freedom from harassment and asylum."
Such bullshit!
Yeah. And this was, of course, a lie. It was a trick to isolate the members further from even the Guyanese now, who've been relatively friendly to them. They were not to trust them because of the 6-day siege. There was never any Guyanese military in the forests. The Guyanese judges want nothing to do with this.
Of course. It's all fucking bullshit.
Because it's all so fucking hostile, they want nothing to do with it. It ended when the Guyanese government actually gave Jim Jones's wife full-on assurances that the military were not involved. And they were not going to invade Jonestown. And that was the end of that. But of course, Jim Bob was rattled. Now he thinks, because of this situation he's orchestrated in his own mind, he can't trust the Guyanese government anymore. So he decides to potentially look at moving again. There was a couple more places that he had in mind. It was wanted somewhere that was friendly to socialism, but very well away from anywhere the US had any influence. So you're looking at Cuba, Yugoslavia, North Korea, and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had the most success. They had intense discussions with the Soviet embassy in Georgetown about the potential to relocate. There was a member of the press relations team for the Soviet embassy, a man called, I'm going to butcher this horrifically, Fedor Timofeyev. Yeah.
Do you want me to try?
You can try.
Give me the paper. Fyodor Timofeyev. Timofeyev.
We'll call it that, Timofeyev.
Fyodor
Timofeyev. So this guy was in with the Soviet embassy, and he went to Jonestown at least twice.
Yeah.
They gave speeches together. He extended the Soviet Union's greetings and things like that, and they were heavily discussing relocating out to the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
There even was an offer of money to help grease the wheels of people getting evacuated. So that was his plan, or one of his plans at that point. But the concerned relatives were still being a considerable pain in Jim Jones's rectum, a place that no one wants to be.
You're fucking vile.
Yeah.
You're nasty, and you need Jesus.
With the fire of court papers under Mr. Stone's ass, he joined forces with the concerned relatives, and they began to really put pressure on the US State Department and Congress to sort this shit out, basically. 91 congressmen did heed this call of action. One of them was Leo Ryan.
My boy.
They all wrote letters to the Guyanese Prime Minister to push him into doing something.
Yeah.
You know, they were trying to get the political answer to this. The People's Temple, still represented in California, fought back with a letter campaign of their own, and they had support from the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, who wrote to President Jimmy Carter, describing Jim Jones as a man of the highest character, and stating that the temple defectors were trying to damage Reverend Jones's reputation with apparent bold-faced lies. That's how high Jim Jones's tendrils had gotten into society.
Such an asshole.
Then, after that, they did the Scientology trick of just trying to sue each other into oblivion.
For fuck's sake.
So, I saw one number that the People's Temple wanted $150 million in the 70s from Timothy Stone, and Timothy Stone countersued them back, and it was just getting out of hand.
For fuck's sake.
Yeah, it was getting ridiculous. And at this time is when Mr. Leo Ryan, California's 11th District Representative, got fully involved.
He was a good guy. He was
a good guy.
He was very much a human rights activist.
He was an all-round cool dude. Mr. Ryan actually had a personal reason to get involved. He was friends with the father of Bob Houston, a ex-temple member who had been found dead and mutilated next to a set of train tracks 3 days after mentioning on the phone he wanted to leave the temple.
Yeah.
So he had a personal connection. Mr. Ryan was going to Jonestown.
Mm-hmm.
So on November the 14th, I can't do words today. On November the 14th, the congressman, his aides, reporters, and the concerned relatives flew into Georgetown.
Yeah.
Didn't exactly go as they wanted. Once they arrived in Georgetown, Congressman Ryan didn't waste any time. He introduced himself very abruptly to the People's Temple members in Georgetown at their house.
Yeah.
And wanted to get things going. There was a few days of sort of ham radio back and forth between Georgetown and Jonestown, and it came to the point where they only allowed him in because he threatened to basically walk in anyway.
So it's like, let me in because I'm coming anyway.
Yeah, that was it. He was like, I'm coming anyway, you may as well give me permission. Basically. After that, they were granted permission. The congressman, a cameraman, soundman, reporter, and 14 of the concerned relatives headed to a small airstrip 6 miles from Jonestown.
Yeah.
When they touched down, they still did encounter some resistance from Jonestown members, and it's alleged some of the Guyanese military in the area, but we can't confirm that. But they eventually let into the camp.
My turn now. So, when they reached Jonestown, kind of needless to say, there was a bit of a facade that was going on.
Absolutely.
It wasn't what they were expecting. So there were no guards, nothing really negative going on, and people seemed happy. Leo Ryan was greeted by Marceline, who is Jim Jones's wife.
Yeah.
And she showed them around, kind of just showing them the compound and everything like that. She brought them down to the main pavilion and the gathering area, and on the way, Leo Ryan and his people noticed the amount of people that were just walking around, going about their day-to-day lives, and this, for whatever reason, just made them think that, like, there's nothing really going on here, and that their assumptions about Jonestown were wrong.
Yeah.
Basically. After that, they were escorted to see Jim Jones.
What an honour that must have been.
And Jim Jones greeted them, and he had his lawyer with them, just in case, I'd say.
Course.
And they had dinner together. Kind of needless to say, the dinner was a massive feast.
Yeah.
With meat and vegetables and not what the people were eating.
Jim Bob the hypocrite. Jim Bob the hypocrite.
And all through this, they're being filmed. So the cameraman's doing his fucking thing.
Yeah.
Reporters kind of thought that Jim was high on drugs.
Yeah.
Because he was slurring his words, he was stuttering and everything like that. No, he was.
He was off his tits.
He was off his tits. One of them, fucking MVP here, directly asked him about the threats of mass suicide.
Yeah.
And Jim Jones simply just said, and quote, "I said it was better to commit suicide than to kill."
The dirty bastard.
That's... Like, I get so angry about this. My knee has been going since we started this.
You have been twitching considerably.
I get so fucking angry about this. Let's move on to the relatives that came with them. As we said, there were 14 relatives that came. And you're probably kind of wondering what they thought about seeing their relatives that they thought were in danger for the very first time. Now, the reporters were fooled, but the relatives, they knew something was up.
Yeah.
When the relatives met, the temple members... they kind of gave elusive and generic answers to every question.
Just sort of like pre-recorded answers almost.
Very scripted.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, Jim Jones is the best.
Yeah.
This is the best place
I am
ever.
happy here. What more could I want from here? Jim Jones is the man.
And some even accused the relatives of coming to kill them.
Fucking hell.
Yeah. So they were proper brainwashed.
Yeah. But then you can understand why, like having a glimpse into the conditions of the place.
Yeah.
Like, full-on behaviour modification.
During the dinner, Leo Ryan, he went round with his small camera crew and interviewed some of the temple members. He still had it in his head that something might be wrong.
Yeah.
So while he was interviewing these people, he kind of discreetly showed them a piece of paper that's told them to nod if they wanted to leave.
Yeah.
And no one did.
Okay, fair enough.
After dinner, Jonestown had an entertainment committee. And they put on a kind of a show for their guests. Yeah. Like... singing, dancing, that whole kind of thing. And obviously, if you were to look in at that particular time, everyone seemed happy, everyone was dancing, everyone was laughing. It seemed like a very happy place. Jim Jones brought Leo Ryan on stage after the entertainment had finished, and Leo Ryan said that he was glad that most people seemed happy in Jonestown. And obviously, like, people applauded, in agreement, and everything like that. It's worth noting here that the speech went on for very few minutes, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. But during this time, a temple member, he was called Vernon Gosney, and he handed reporter Don Harris a tiny piece of paper. And the way he did this was, you can't see me, fucking hell. So he was kind of sitting with his arms to his side, and what he did was he put the piece of paper kind of in the fold of his arm. Yeah. Which obviously fell to the ground. Vernon Gosney picked up the paper and gave it to Don Harris and said, "Oh, here, you dropped this." Yeah. Typical kind of thing, like. And after the speech was finished, Don Harris gave the note to Leo Ryan, who opened it away from Jim Jones. Yeah. And the note said, "Dear Congressman, please help us get out of Jonestown." And it was signed by himself and Monica Bagby. Yeah. On November 18th, Leo Ryan woke up in a Jonestown guest house to continue interviewing members. The rest of his kind of entourage weren't allowed to stay in Jonestown. Okay. They had to stay away from the compound and they could come back the next morning. Yeah. I think it was Port Kaituma.
That's the airstrip,
yeah. They had to stay in Port Kaituma. Marceline again showed them round and kind of escorted them everywhere. The crew started to feel that there was something a bit off that was going on here.
I imagine there must have been a pretty strange vibe from the place.
Yeah, because, like, you know, it's one thing to keep up a facade for a night. Yeah. But to keep up a facade...
The next day,
the cracks are going to start to show.
Yeah, they are.
So they felt that... I think what happened was they saw some children playing, and when they looked into some of the houses... Some people were just like watching TV, but they just got the feeling that these innocent moments, like that they weren't random.
Yeah, they were very scripted.
Yeah. once they were interviewing some people, they asked direct questions like, how do you feel about Jonestown?
Yeah.
Almost every single one of them was the same.
Yeah, the same answer.
The same answer. So obviously Leo Ryan now thinks, he's beating
Definitely something's wrong.
and he's beating his head against this brick wall because he's trying to give these people opportunities to leave, but none of them are taking it.
Yeah.
So he feels very, what's the word?
Frustrated.
Frustrated and defeated almost.
Yeah.
So once they'd finished the interviews, they met with Jim Jones again. The reporters asked Jim Jones directly about the rumours of human rights violations.
Yeah.
He denied.
Of course.
Of course.
Because no one who abuses human rights is going to say, yes, I'm abusing human rights.
No. This is the thing that pisses me off, and what I think, anyway, kind of transpired the events.
Yeah.
They showed Jim Jones the note from Vernon Gosney.
That wasn't a very smart thing to do, really, was it?
Well, I think I know why they did it, but I feel like they didn't know the magnitude of this cult.
Yeah, they thought they were doing the right thing.
And you just have to wonder, like, if they didn't give the note to him, would things have played out differently?
Who knows? We can maybe have a theory about that later.
Jones quickly, he kind of dismissed the note, and he went on to ask, when are they leaving? Like, when are you going back to America? Yeah. He even said that anyone who wanted to leave with them could. Yeah. Just to kind of further dispel this.
Yeah, just to show face almost.
Yeah. It was this moment that one of Jim Jones's aides, Edel Parks, she walked up to the congressman and stated that she and her family wanted to leave. Yeah. So this was a kick in the bollocks for Jim Jones. This was one of his people that he trusted. And she just turned around and basically slapped him in the face and said, take me with you.
Yep, I want to go.
This obviously hurt Jim Jones's ego, so he begged them to stay. Yeah. But they refused.
Because all that Jim Jones has ever been afraid of is being alone.
Yeah, pretty much. So it's a small fucking community, so news started to spread quickly that they were leaving. And within hours, it was very clear that there were more people that wanted to leave. And around 14 people insisted on leaving. It's obviously like more wanted to leave, but they were kind of afraid of Jim Jones.
Yeah, they were afraid of repercussions if they weren't taken there and then.
Yeah, exactly. So the people, they kind of piled onto a flatbed truck to go to Port Kaituma and go to the airstrip that was there.
I remember an interview with Vernon Gosney, actually. Yeah. He was saying about his time on that truck, and he's saying, I genuinely didn't think I would be escaping. I didn't think the truck would make it.
There was a bit of backlash from the people of People's Temple. It seems that the majority of them, they weren't happy about people leaving. They felt like they weren't being loyal, and
they were betraying them. And
exactly. So what I kind of thought was, I think some of them did it because they didn't want to lose face in front of Jim Jones. Yeah. They secretly wanted to leave too.
But they were too afraid.
So the easiest thing to do would be to
just agree with them.
To slate the ones that were leaving. This bit broke my heart. Vernon Gosney, his note kicked off the whole thing. Yeah. He decided not to bring his 4-year-old son with him. Yeah. What did this was, his son was black. Yeah. And Jim Jones had kind of got into everyone's heads that the racism in the US was
so out of control.
And that black people were being sent to concentration camps. Yeah. And obviously this wasn't true.
Not true in the slightest. But when you're isolated in the middle of a jungle miles from anywhere with only Jim Jones as your source of news from the outside world, it's easy to understand.
And obviously, because people of colour were the minority back then, that was the majority of his
argument to get people away.
Yeah. So for this reason, he left his 4-year-old son in Jonestown. Because so many people wanted to leave, they weren't prepared for this many people to need to be escorted. So they had to order another plane. Yeah. Leo Ryan decided he wanted to stay another night to interview other members to see if any more wanted to leave. Vernon Gosney, he tried to talk him out of it, but Ryan was very insistent and saying, no, I'm going to stay, I'm going to help these people. At this moment, Leo Ryan was attacked with a knife by a temple member. He struggled with his attacker right before he was pulled him off. He was uninjured. Yeah. Blah, 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 blah. But this was enough to convince Leo Ryan to leave.
It's time to go.
Yeah, he felt like he wasn't welcome, and, he'll do some more from America. Yeah, that kind of thing.
It's time to go.
Yeah. So right before they left, like literally they're about to turn the fucking ignition and fuck off.
Yeah.
Another person emerged saying they wanted to leave, and this was Larry Layton. The defectors, they were very kind of dubious of Layton because he was an obsessive follower of Jim Jones.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't make sense for him to want to suddenly leave.
It didn't add up.
It didn't. But Leo Ryan, he said, look, we're not turning anyone away.
Yeah.
Anyone who wants to leave can come. So they took him with them.
Yeah.
So they drove to the Port Khartoum airstrip and they arrived in the late afternoon. But the runway was empty, even though the planes should have been there. So they ended up waiting around 20 minutes for the planes to get there. And then they started to board. Larry Layton didn't. He just kind of stood in the middle of the runway. He wasn't helping or helping load things up or anything like that. Then a truck arrives coming from the direction of Jonestown and kind of waits down the runway a bit. They felt off about it, like the crew. The
whole thing felt sketchy.
Yeah, they felt very sketchy, but they kind of thought that it was just Jonestown making sure that they actually leave.
Yeah.
So there weren't enough seats on the plane for all the people, so they had to be split. And it was, some people would fly out that day and some people would fly out the next morning. So everyone was boarded now. And right as the plane is about to take off, several guards appear for the truck's trailer that was waiting down the runway. And they start circling the planes and they just start opening fire.
Oh dear.
On the planes. And obviously there were still people on the runway who were going to go back the next day. So the people outside of the plane, they kind of ducked for cover. They ran. They tried to hide behind things and just,
not get shot.
Pretty much. And the people inside the planes, they tried to close the doors just to get some kind of protection so that the guards didn't come up or anything like that.
Yeah.
Now, some people managed to run into the jungle and kind of evade them. Other people did not. So inside the plane, Layton pulled out a gun and he shot all of the passengers, but it only fired 3 times before jamming.
That's lucky, in a sense.
Yeah, and the other passengers, they tackled him.
Yeah.
And they managed to, get him under control. The second plane, in a panic, ended up just fucking leaving.
Yeah.
Taking off, fucking leaving everyone
Gone.
behind.
Did that have anyone on it, that second plane?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It had a fair few people on it. I think it was 3 or 4 people on it.
Yeah.
On the airstrip, Leo Ryan was shot in the neck and his cameraman was shot in the leg. So
there's footage, isn't there?
Yeah.
From the actual shooting of the cameraman.
Yeah, his camera, he was rolling because he was filming the whole thing.
Yeah.
When he got shot, the camera, he hit the floor and the camera shattered.
Yeah.
So it just kind of goes blank after that. But a reporter managed to flee into the jungle and survive.
Yeah.
But the gunmen, they kind of strolled through the airstrip and they were shooting all the injured people at close range to make sure they were dead.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, Leo Ryan did not survive.
Did not make it, along with other people.
Yeah. So back in Jonestown, obviously, Jim Jones feels like he needs to do some kind of damage control.
Yeah.
So in an attempt to calm everyone's jitters, Marceline kind of ordered everyone to relax in their homes, which was kind of a big thing because they're used to working all day, all night. So
they must have known that something was up.
It said that a storm kind of started raging at that time, which is kind of, what's that word? There's a word for that.
Oh, it's
where the weather mirrors.
Yeah, I know the word. I can't think of the word you mean, but I know the word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, bollocks.
It's like a writing term, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
For I can't remember it.
No,
now.
I can't think of the
word.
word.
No, I can't think of it. Answers on a postcard.
Yeah. And then Jim Jones's voice came on the loudspeaker.
Oh dear.
And it said, white night, everybody to the pavilion. So people filed into the pavilion. Guards kind of circled around the pavilion and around the temple members. And then Jim Jones took to the stage and he turned on his tape recorder. And this is where we'll play the first minute of the thing.
How very much I've loved you. How very much I've tried my best to give you the good life. But in spite of all of that I've tried, a handful of our people, with their lives, have made our life impossible. There's no way to detach ourselves from what's happened today. Not only we're in a compound situation, not only are there those who have left and committed the betrayal of the century. Some have stolen children from others, and they're in pursuit right now to kill them because they stole their children. And we are sitting here waiting on a powder keg. I don't think this is what we want to do with our babies.
We'll leave the full link to the full speech in the show notes because it's far too harrowing.
Yeah, we're not really into broadcasting that, to be honest.
It's not that we're not interested in broadcasting it. It's just it's so sad.
Yeah.
And it's 45 minutes long.
Yeah.
Basically, as a synopsis for the speech and everything that went on, Jim Jones states that they have been betrayed by the defectors.
Defectors.
Yeah. They have been betrayed by the defectors, and that Leo Ryan and his crew would parachute into the compound and kind of tear them all apart.
Yeah.
He uses this as a reason that they all need to commit revolutionary suicide.
Yeah.
He made his followers feel trapped and that people would continue trying to come and ruin the cult. He offered anyone who objected to step forward.
Yeah.
One woman named Christine Miller stood up, and she was the only one that stood up. She asked if they could just move to Russia, like Jim Jones has always said that they could. He laughed and he praised her for being so direct and stuff like that. He refused and he said the country was against them and he wouldn't take them. And he says he knew this because he was a prophet.
Yeah, that's how he also claimed to know what had happened on the planes.
Yeah.
Even though it's clearly obvious that he orchestrated it.
Yeah.
But he said, no, I didn't orchestrate that. I just know because I'm a prophet.
Yeah, that's it. And he said suicide was the only option for them. He said he wanted to choose his own death and for people to follow him. What I noticed while I was listening to this was the longer the speech went on, the more slurred he got.
Yeah, the more sort of incoherent and...
So, what I think... Now, this is, like, completely, like, off the cuff.
Yeah.
No notes or anything. I think he got really fucking high before he did. He knew what he was going to do.
Yeah.
He got really fucking high so he wouldn't feel the pain.
I think I was reading from one of the autopsy reports, it was hard to see if he had any substances in his body.
Yeah.
But I think they said it was like a near toxic level of barbiturates in his system.
Yeah.
So there's probably some credence to that he got off his fucking tits before doing
so that he wouldn't have to feel anything.
Yeah.
Basically. Christine, she was an MVP. Like, she continued to fight and have hope. But when that was no use, she tried pleading for the children and the babies.
Yeah.
She was like, well, if we have to do it, leave the children and the babies.
Yeah.
This was ignored and she was accused of being afraid to die. He went on to say that they needed to lay down their lives as a protest to what's being done to them.
It's so infuriating because there's nothing being done to them.
It's all him.
It's all him that's done it to them.
Suddenly, the truck that carried Leo Ryan and his crew to Port Kaituma drove to the gathering area outside the pavilion, and Jim Jones turned to the people and simply said that Leo Ryan has been murdered.
Yeah.
He claimed he didn't know who shot him.
Of course he fucking did. It was all his idea.
And it's at this stage now that a large vat or drum was brought into the pavilion with enough kind of paper cups for everyone.
Yeah.
And this drum was filled with grape-flavoured Kool-Aid.
Yep.
After the drum was positioned, the medical team filled it up with a mixture of Valium, chloral hydrate, cyanide, and Phenergan.
Yeah.
And they kind of mixed it all together. The residents, they didn't even notice that they were being filled with something.
Yeah.
They thought it was just another white knight
one
practice.
Of his little tricks.
So one of Jim Jones's mistresses climbed on stage and helped him. Jim Jones asked if there was a way to make it taste any less bitter.
Yeah.
And she said no. And he asked if it would be quick, and she said yes. Newsflash, it was not.
It was not.
The crowd were ordered to form an orderly line in front of the drum. Babies and children would be first. Parents and older siblings were asked to keep their children calm. The first woman and baby approached the drum, and the woman poured a syringe of the poison into the baby's mouth before drinking some herself. They went outside the pavilion and sat down. The mother was cradling her child. It said that nurses were polite and asked any mothers with babies to approach the drum, but when they refused, the armed guards got involved and kind of pushed them towards. When the babies started screaming after ingesting the poison, and the worried parents were lied to, saying that it was only because the drink was so bitter, not because they were being fucking poisoned.
By cyanide, which is not a particularly nice way to go as poisons go.
No. Once all the babies had been poisoned, the children were next. At this stage, the majority of people knew what was going on around them. Babies were dead in their mother's arms, and their mothers were slumped back and not moving.
Yeah.
So they could see all this, and so at this point now they knew that it wasn't another practice.
Yeah.
All while this was going on, Jim Jones kept saying, "Don't be afraid to die." When members started refusing to drink the poison, armed guards would point their guns at the members, and nurses would pour the poison into the mouths of the members and cover their nose and mouth so they had no choice but to swallow.
That's horrific. Absolutely fucking horrific.
When people were getting too out of control, nurses started injecting members with the poison. So while people were fucking panicking because everyone's dead,
and dying horrifically around them,
children were screaming and they were foaming at the mouth, turning blue, like it's horrible. Jim Jones continued his speech while people were dying and convulsing around him. The bodies of the dead were dragged outside by Jim Jones's aides in rows to make sure there was enough room for everyone. When they ran out of room, they just threw the bodies on top of bodies, on top of bodies, on top of bodies. Some nurses even went outside to make sure people were dead and not just faking it, so they put their stethoscope to their chest and make sure that they were actually dead.
That is truly horrific.
When the final few people came up to get their poison, Jim Jones recorded his last message. Quote, "We didn't commit suicide. We committed an act of revolutionary suicide, protesting the conditions of an inhumane world." Jones returned to his seat on stage, which was surrounded by bodies. 909 men, women, children and babies had died in the space of less than half an hour.
And like I said, cyanide isn't a nice way to go.
No. 304 of those 909 were children. What happens next is kind of unclear, but what is clear is that Jim Jones didn't die from the poison.
No, Jim wouldn't take that, would he?
No. What happened to him was he died by a single gunshot wound to the head. It's not clear whether he killed himself or ordered someone else to, but what is fucking clear is he didn't even have the courage to die.
No.
The way everyone else had just died for him.
No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't be the one convulsing on the ground, would he?
No, he died quickly. That was it. And so the reason we're able to understand what happened is because the survivors, they played a vital role. So the people who escaped in the second plane back on the airstrip in Port Kaituma, they landed in Georgetown and raised the alarm. The next morning, they sent out a rescue plane to the airstrip. They weren't expecting survivors, although there were several injured media members and temple members at the airstrip.
Yeah.
So they were airlifted to the hospital in Georgetown. All in all, 80 members of Jonestown survived out of 1,000.
Yeah.
Over 1,000. All for various reasons. Some were kind of out running errands in the morning and they didn't get back.
Wasn't there a basketball team in Georgetown?
Something like that, yeah.
That conveniently had his son with them.
Yeah. 3 of the people who survived were Jim Jones's sons. And they came out and they kind of told everyone what happened.
Yeah.
After the news broke, the Guyanese authorities sent 100 soldiers to investigate. When they got there, they were not prepared for what they saw. There were hundreds of bodies in various colours kind of littered outside the pavilion, just on top of each other. So they spent the next 3 days kind of combing through and kind of...
just sort of finding anything out they could.
Yeah. And 3 days later, some of the surviving members were asked to identify as many bodies as they could. And 300 people could not be identified.
Wow. Is that just because of the conditions of what happened?
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe children whose faces were distorted and everything like that. Only 400 of the identified bodies were claimed by families. Some were too poor, some were too ashamed to even claim the bodies of their family. The remainder, they were buried in a mass grave in Oakland in California. And a remembrance ceremony takes place there every year, remembering one of the worst massacres ever.
I believe it was the largest loss of US lives before the September 11th attack in one go.
That was it.
Yeah.
Almost 1,000 people in less than half an hour.
Yeah.
And that's where we stop.
Yep, that's it. That's the end now.
So that's it's difficult to get through.
It's not easy. Not easy to sort of imagine yourself there.
See, I can. That's the thing.
That's the quite spooky thing. Like.
That's the quite spooky thing. Like, obviously, like, I'm not going to go around and say I was there, like, but, you know, it's...
You can imagine it.
I can imagine it, and I don't know, like I said in the last episode, I kind of feel like I knew a lot of this before I even heard about it. And obviously I'm not old enough to have been there or have anything to do with it. I was born in 1993.
Yeah, long afterwards. But it's absolutely horrific.
It's awful, and like, we're not joking about anything. Like,
no,
the only thing we're joking about is Jim Jones, because he's a fucking joke.
Yeah, but then is he a joke because he convinced nearly 1,000 people to not only die, but die in a horrific and painful and sad way.
Yeah,
like,
they were told that it would be quick, it would be painless,
and it was neither of those things.
Like, I think that when people started dying inside the pavilion, that the guards would kind of drag them outside so people didn't have to see what they were getting in for. You know, it's fucked up. So,
like, cyanide is an awful poison, and the other problem is that your dosage is all wrong, for one.
Yeah.
Your dosage is all over the place. Some people will get more poison, some people will get less.
Some people it would take 5 minutes to die.
Sometimes it'll take half an hour, and you're suffering for that entire half an hour.
Yeah. You
getting that mixed with God knows whatever else they put in there.
Yeah.
Like, it's so wrong.
And the fact that he convinced so many people to do it.
Yeah. Like, it's so sad, so.
Yeah, so we'll maybe go for a happier episode next.
Yeah.
So, again, if you want to listen to the full speech,
I wouldn't recommend it, to be honest.
I wouldn't recommend it. You can hear everything. That's all I'm going to say. Like,
it puts you in a funny mood afterwards.
Yeah, like, I'm in a funny mood now after all this.
Yeah, I want to. We'll go do something fun.
I want to go play Sims or something to make me feel a bit better.
Yeah, we'll go do something fun.
But that's it for this episode and this mini series.
Yeah, thankfully, thank
fuck. I'd be glad when we don't have to do this.
Yeah,
we don't have to spend weeks
pouring through Jim Jones's rambling bullshit.
Yeah. So happier episode next, promise. If you like that episode, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Don't forget to leave us a review. We have a fair few reviews that we'll probably read next week.
Yeah, we'll do some happy shit next week.
Yeah, we'll read them next week. You know, it just doesn't feel right to kind of do that right now. We have merch. We have YouTube channel. All links will be in the show notes. I'm done. Yeah, I'm a head out. I'm done. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye. Bye.